In the far edge of the Orion sector, a terrible silence filled the stars. Only a few days earlier, this place had been full of war. Human ships had fought here with everything they had. But now the battle was over. Or at least, that was what everyone believed. The Dominion fleet floated calmly around the broken remains of human ships. Thousands of alien warships surrounded the last human defense station like hunters circling a wounded animal. Many human ships burned slowly in space, their metal bodies drifting quietly in the cold darkness. The alien commanders watched the battlefield from their command bridges with pride. After years of war, humanity had finally been defeated. Entire human colonies had fallen one after another. The Dominion Empire had crushed every fleet that tried to stop them. Now the last human station was the only thing left in this sector. Inside the Dominion flagship, Grand Admiral Croft looked out through a massive window at the silent battlefield. The alien commander was tall, armored, and cold. His voice was calm as he spoke to the officers around him. The humans fought well, he said, but their war is finished. Around him, the alien officers nodded. They believed the same thing. The humans had lost everything. One officer spoke carefully. Sir, the last human station is still active. Croft smiled slowly. Then we will remove the last piece of resistance. Prepare the fleet for final bombardment. Across the battlefield, thousands of alien ships slowly turned their weapons toward the small human station. Inside the station, the situation was very different. The halls were dark and quiet. Many systems had been damaged during the battle. Human soldiers moved quickly between control rooms, trying to repair what little they could. The station commander, Admiral James Haley, stood inside the command center, staring at a large tactical screen. The screen showed the massive Dominion fleet surrounding them. There were too many ships. Far too many. One officer spoke quietly beside him. Sir, we cannot survive another attack. Haley did not answer immediately. He knew the officer was right. Their defense weapons were almost gone. Their fighters had been destroyed during the battle. Most of the station's shields were failing. The Dominion fleet would destroy them easily. Yet Haley did not look afraid. Instead, he kept staring at the dark space beyond the alien fleet, as if he was waiting for something. Another officer walked toward him. Sir, the Dominion fleet is preparing to fire. Haley nodded slowly. I know. For a moment, the command room was completely silent. Everyone understood what was about to happen. This station was the last human stronghold in the entire sector. When it fell, there would be no one left to protect the nearby colonies. One young officer looked down at his console and whispered, Sir, do you think anyone will come? Haley looked at the stars again. Then he answered quietly, They will come. The young officer looked confused. Sir, there are no fleets left. The admiral said nothing more. Far away outside the station, the Dominion fleet continued preparing their weapons. Massive cannons slowly charged with glowing energy. Fighter squadrons formed attack formations around the larger ships. The alien armada was ready to end the war. Back on the Dominion flagship, Admiral Croft watched the final preparations. His voice echoed through the command deck. Begin the final strike. But before the order could be completed, something strange happened. A sensor officer suddenly stood up from his station. His voice was full of confusion. Sir, we are detecting something. Croft turned slowly. What is it? The officer looked at his screen again. I do not understand the signal. Another officer moved closer to look. The reading was unusual. Very unusual. It was not coming from any known ship. The signal was extremely powerful, and it was growing stronger every second. Croft frowned. Is it a human weapon? No, sir, the officer answered quickly. It is not a weapon. Then what is it? The command deck became silent as more sensor reports appeared across the screens. Multiple scanners across the fleet began detecting the same strange disturbance. Space itself seemed to be shifting. One officer spoke nervously. Sir, we are detecting a distortion in deep space. How large? Croft asked. The officer hesitated. Very large. Another alarm suddenly sounded across the bridge. New readings appeared. Dozens of them. Then hundreds. Every alien ship in the fleet began receiving the same warning. A massive gravitational disturbance had appeared beyond the battlefield. Croft walked closer to the main display. "Show it." The giant screen changed. The officers stared at what appeared. Far beyond the battlefield, the darkness of space had begun to twist. The stars around that region were slowly disappearing, as if something enormous was moving through them. One officer whispered, "That is impossible." Croft narrowed his eyes. "Report." The sensor officer spoke again, his voice shaking slightly. "Sir, we are detecting multiple energy signatures." "How many?" Croft asked. The officer looked again. Then his eyes widened. "Thousands." Across the Dominion fleet, confusion spread quickly. Ships began turning their sensors toward the distant disturbance. Even the alien fighters stopped their formations. No one understood what they were seeing. But inside the human defense station, Admiral Haley finally smiled. He had been waiting for this moment. The strange distortion in space suddenly expanded. Light flashed across the darkness. And then, the first shadow appeared. A massive shape slowly emerged from the void. Behind it, another appeared. And another. And another. Thousands of enormous shapes began emerging from the darkness of space. Human warships. An entire fleet. No, something far larger. Far stronger. A fleet the galaxy had never seen before. And the war that everyone believed was finished had just begun again. The Dominion fleet stared into the darkness of space. No one spoke. Every alien sensor officer kept their eyes locked on the growing disturbance. The stars in that region were slowly vanishing as massive shadows moved forward. On the Dominion flagship, Grand Admiral Croft stood motionless near the command display. His cold, confident expression slowly faded. The officer beside him spoke in a quiet voice. "Sir, more energy signatures are appearing." Croft looked at the screen again. The numbers continued rising. Hundreds, then thousands. The officer tried to stay calm, but his voice trembled. "Sir, the signal strength is increasing rapidly." Another officer turned from his console. "All fleets are reporting the same readings. Something enormous is approaching." Croft narrowed his eyes. "Prepare all ships for combat." The Dominion officers quickly began sending orders across the fleet. Thousands of alien warships powered their weapons again. Fighters returned to formation. Massive cannons charged with glowing energy. But even as the Dominion fleet prepared for battle, something strange happened. Their sensors began to fail. Many scanners could no longer read the incoming objects clearly. The distortion in space was interfering with every system. One officer spoke nervously. "Sir, we cannot identify the approaching vessels." Croft remained silent. Then he asked one simple question. "Are they human?" The officer checked the data again. "Sir, the signal pattern matches human technology, but it is far more powerful than anything we have seen before." Inside the human defense station, the atmosphere was very different. For the first time in days, hope returned. Soldiers and officers gathered around the large viewing windows. Far beyond the alien fleet, they could see the strange lights growing brighter. One young technician whispered, "Is it really them?" Admiral James Haley stood at the center of the command room. His eyes focused on the growing fleet emerging from the void. He answered calmly, "Yes, they are finally here." Another officer looked confused. "Sir, we believed every human fleet had been destroyed." Haley smiled slightly. That was what the Dominion believed. The room grew quiet. Then the first human warship fully appeared from the distortion. It was enormous, far larger than any human battleship that had fought earlier in the war. Its hull was dark and heavy. Rows of massive weapons lined the sides of the ship. Bright lights glowed along its armored surface. Behind it, dozens more ships began appearing. Then hundreds, then thousands. A massive human armada was emerging from deep space. Back on the Dominion flagship, the alien officers stared at the growing fleet. One officer whispered in disbelief, "This is impossible." Croft slowly walked closer to the main screen. The new human ships were unlike anything the Dominion had seen before. They were larger, heavier, and clearly built for war. Another sensor officer spoke urgently. "So the number of ships continues to increase." "How many?" Croft asked. The officer swallowed slowly. "We are counting over 4,000 warships, and more are still arriving." For the first time since the war began, uncertainty spread across the Dominion command deck. Croft clenched his hands behind his back. He had destroyed many human fleets before, but this one felt different. Very different. Another officer shouted suddenly, "Sir, transmission is coming from the human fleet." Croft turned toward the communication officer. "Put on screen." A moment later, the image of a human commander appeared. The man wore a dark uniform with the emblem of Earth Command on his chest. His face was calm, his eyes steady. The Dominion officers watched in silence. The human commander spoke slowly. "This is Admiral Victor Kane of the Earth Expeditionary Fleet." His voice was clear and confident. "You have attacked human colonies. You have destroyed civilian worlds. You believed humanity was finished." The Dominion officers listened carefully. Then the human admiral continued, "You were wrong." Behind him, through the bridge window, thousands of human warships could be seen spreading across space. Their weapons slowly powered on. Croft stared at the screen. His voice remained cold. "Human fleets were destroyed years ago." The human admiral gave a small smile. "The fleets you destroyed were only the beginning. This fleet was never meant to defend. It was built for something else." Croft narrowed his eyes. "For what?" The human admiral answered calmly. "For war." Across the battlefield, the massive human fleet finished forming battle lines. Long rows of battleships spread across space. Carrier ships released waves of fighters. Massive dreadnoughts moved slowly toward the center of the battlefield, their enormous cannons glowing with energy. Inside the Dominion fleet, tension spread quickly. Many alien captains began sending urgent messages. Some ships attempted to reposition. Others powered their shields to maximum strength. Croft remained silent for several seconds. Then he gave the order. "All Dominion fleets prepare to fire." Thousands of alien warships turned their weapons toward the approaching human armada. But before the Dominion fleet could attack, something unexpected happened. The human ships moved first. Without warning, hundreds of human vessels suddenly accelerated forward, their engines burning bright against the darkness of space. Fighter squadrons launched from massive carriers. Thousands of small ships rushed toward the alien fleet like a storm. Dominion officers shouted across the command deck, "Sir, human fighters approaching. Defense systems activate." Laser batteries and missile launchers across the Dominion fleet opened fire. Bright explosions filled the battlefield, but the human fighters continued moving. Fast, organized, fearless. Then the first human battleship fired. A massive beam of blue energy cut through the darkness. It struck a Dominion cruiser directly. The alien ship exploded instantly. Shockwaves spread through nearby vessels. For a moment, every Dominion officer froze. Then another human ship fired, and another. And another. The darkness of space suddenly filled with flashes of light and destruction. The battle had begun. But deep within the Dominion fleet, something far worse was happening. New sensor readings appeared on the screens. The officers stared at the numbers in horror. "Sir, there are more warp signatures appearing behind the human fleet." Croft turned slowly. "More ships." The officer nodded slowly. "Yes, sir. Many more." And the war the Dominion believed they had already won was only just beginning. The battlefield turned into chaos. Bright explosions flashed across the darkness of space as the first wave of human attacks struck the Dominion fleet. Alien ships tried to hold their formation, but confusion spread quickly across their command channels. Many captains did not understand what was happening. For years, the Dominion Empire had been winning the war. Human fleets had fallen one after another. Their colonies burned, their defenses shattered. Yet now thousands of new human warships had suddenly appeared from the void, and they were far stronger than anything the Dominion had faced before. On the Dominion flagship, Grand Admiral Croft stood silently watching the battle unfold. Around him, officers rushed between consoles, shouting reports and warnings. "Sir, multiple cruisers destroyed. Fighter wings lost. Defense lines collapsing." Another officer spoke urgently. Sir, human dreadnoughts are moving toward the center of our fleet. Croth remained calm, but his eyes grew colder. Show me the main fleet. The massive screen in front of him changed. The image revealed the full scale of the battle. Dominion ships were firing everything they had. Streams of plasma beams, missiles, and laser fire filled the empty space. But the human fleet continued moving forward. Their ships advanced slowly, but with terrifying confidence. Huge battleships pushed through the battlefield like unstoppable mountains. Their weapons fired again and again, each blast tearing through alien cruisers. Fighters from human carriers swarmed across the Dominion lines. Small, fast, and deadly. Dominion ships exploded one after another. Inside the human flagship, the bridge was quiet and controlled. Admiral Victor Kane stood near the central command console. Large tactical screens surrounded him, showing every movement of the fleet. Thousands of human ships were moving in perfect coordination. One officer looked at the battle reports. Enemy cruisers collapsing across Sector 3. Fighter groups pushing through their defense line. Kane nodded slowly. Maintain pressure. Do not let them regroup. Another officer turned from his station. Sir, Dominion fleet attempting counterattack. Several alien dreadnoughts are moving toward our forward ships. Kane looked at the screen. He could see the massive alien warships turning their cannons toward the human fleet. Very well, he said calmly. Bring the heavy line forward. Moments later, a new group of human ships moved from the back of the formation. These ships were even larger, their armored hulls covered with massive weapon systems. As they entered the battlefield, the entire human fleet adjusted formation. Fighters cleared the path. Cruisers moved aside. The giant dreadnoughts advanced. Back on the Dominion flagship, one officer stared at the approaching ships with fear. Sir, those vessels are enormous. Another officer whispered. They are bigger than our command ships. Croft clenched his hand slowly. Focus all fire on the leading human dreadnought. Hundreds of Dominion ships immediately turned their weapons toward the massive human vessel. A storm of energy beams and missiles rushed toward the target. Bright explosions surrounded the dreadnought. For a moment, the battlefield disappeared behind clouds of fire. Dominion officers watched, carefully waiting to see the ship destroyed. But when the explosions cleared, the human dreadnought was still there, its shields glowing brightly, its hull barely damaged. Silence spread across the Dominion command deck. Then the dreadnought fired. A single massive beam of white light shot across space. It struck an alien battleship directly. The Dominion vessel shattered instantly. Another human dreadnought fired. Then another. Huge alien ships began exploding across the battlefield. The Dominion fleet was slowly losing control. Inside the human flagship, one officer smiled slightly. Their defense lines are collapsing, Admiral. Kane did not celebrate. Continue advancing. Their command ships are still active. We finish this when our leadership falls. The human fleet pushed deeper into the Dominion formation. Fighter wings destroyed communication ships. Cruisers targeted shield generators. Massive dreadnoughts broke through the center of the alien fleet. Every movement was precise. Every attack carefully planned. Back on the Dominion flagship, Croft realized something terrible. This was not a rescue fleet. This was an invasion force. These ships were built for one purpose: to destroy the Dominion Empire. One officer spoke nervously. Sir, we are receiving panic signals from multiple fleets. Some captains are requesting retreat. Croft turned sharply. There will be no retreat. All ships hold formation. But even as he spoke, another alarm echoed across the bridge. Sir, new warp signatures detected behind us. The officer looked at the readings again, his voice filled with shock. More human ships are arriving. Croft stepped closer to the screen. How many? The officer hesitated before answering. Thousands more. The screen shifted to show the far side of the battlefield. Space twisted once again. Another massive wave of human warships began emerging from the void. Carriers, dreadnoughts, heavy cruisers. The size of a human armada, doubled within minutes. Inside the human defense station, Admiral Haley watched the battle through a large observation window. Around him, wounded soldiers and technicians stared in amazement. The Dominion fleet that had trapped them only hours earlier was now fighting for survival. One young officer whispered, "Sir, the human fleet just keeps growing." Haley nodded slowly. "This fleet has been preparing for a long time." Another officer looked confused. "Sir, where did all these ships come from?" Haley smiled quietly. "From the dark places of space where the Dominion never looked." Far away across the battlefield, the massive human armada continued advancing. The Dominion fleet was slowly being surrounded, and Grand Admiral Croft finally understood the truth. The war he believed he had already won was about to become the greatest defeat the Dominion Empire had ever known. The Dominion fleet was breaking apart. Ships that had once moved in perfect formation were now scattered across the battlefield. Bright explosions burned through the darkness as human warships pushed deeper into enemy territory. Fighters raced between the massive vessels like hunting birds, striking quickly and disappearing again into the chaos. Alien cruisers tried to regroup, but every time they attempted to form a defense line, another wave of human attacks shattered their formation. On the Dominion flagship, Grand Admiral Croft stood in complete silence. His officers no longer spoke with confidence. Their voices were filled with fear and disbelief. "Sir, multiple command ships destroyed. Sir, our outer defense fleets are collapsing. Sir, enemy dreadnoughts are approaching our central command formation." Croft stared at the massive battle display. Thousands of human ships filled the screen. Their movements were organized and relentless. This was not a desperate fleet trying to survive. This was a fleet hunting its enemy. Inside the human flagship, Admiral Victor Kane watched the battle with calm focus. Large tactical screens displayed every movement of the Dominion forces. Human ships continued advancing from multiple directions, slowly surrounding the alien fleet. One officer spoke quietly. "Enemy forces are retreating from Sector 7. Another officer looked at new sensor reports. Dominion carriers attempting to escape the battlefield. Kane shook his head slightly. "They will not escape. Deploy the interceptor wings." Within seconds, hundreds of human fighters launched from massive carriers. Their engines burned bright as they accelerated toward the fleeing alien ships. Missiles streaked across space. Alien carriers exploded one after another. The Dominion fleet was losing more ships every minute. Back on the Dominion flagship, tension filled the command deck. "Sir, our fighter squadrons have been destroyed. Sir, communication lines are failing. Sir, enemy ships are approaching our command position." Croft slowly walked toward the center of the bridge. For years, the Dominion Empire had ruled the stars with fear. Their fleets had crushed every enemy. No civilization had ever challenged them like this. Until humanity. One officer spoke carefully. "Grand Admiral, we must retreat." Croft turned his head slowly. "Retreat." The words sounded strange even to him. Another officer stepped forward. "Sir, if we do not withdraw, now the entire fleet will be destroyed." Croft remained silent. Far beyond the flagship, the battlefield burned with constant explosions. Human dreadnoughts continued advancing like unstoppable giants. Their massive cannons fired again and again, tearing through alien battleships. Fighter wings swarmed across the Dominion lines, attacking weak points with deadly precision. The Dominion fleet had lost control of the battle. But Croft was not ready to surrender. "Prepare the annihilator cannons," he said quietly. Several officers looked at him with shock. "Sir, those weapons will destroy half the battlefield." Croft answered without hesitation. "Then we will destroy half the battlefield. Send the order to every command ship." Moments later, across the Dominion fleet, several massive ships began charging their most powerful weapons. Huge energy cores glowed brighter and brighter. Inside, the human flagship, sensor alarms suddenly sounded. One officer looked up quickly. "Admiral, we are detecting massive energy spikes across the Dominion fleet." Kane stepped closer to the tactical screen. "Show me." The display highlighted several enormous alien warships preparing to fire. Those ships were not ordinary battleships. They were planetary siege vessels. Their weapons were designed to destroy entire fleets with a single attack. Another officer spoke urgently. "Sir, if those cannons fire our forward fleet, we'll suffer heavy losses." Kane remained calm. "Target those ships immediately. Bring the Titan line forward." Deep within the human armada, a group of enormous vessels began moving toward the battlefield. These ships were unlike anything else in the fleet. Their hulls were thick and heavily armored. Their engines burned with powerful blue light. Each ship carried weapons so large they could be seen glowing across the darkness of space. Back on the Dominion flagship, one officer suddenly shouted, "Sir, new enemy ships approaching from the rear human fleet." Croth watched as the massive human vessels slowly moved forward. His eyes narrowed. "What are those ships?" The sensor officer answered quietly, "Sir, their power output is far beyond normal dreadnought class." The giant human ships entered the center of the battlefield. Their weapons began charging with blinding light. Inside the human flagship, Kane gave a single order: "Fire!" A moment later, the Titan ships unleashed their attack. Massive beams of energy tore across the battlefield. Each beam struck a Dominion siege vessel directly. One by one, the giant alien ships exploded in bright flashes of light. The Dominion Annihilator cannons were destroyed before they could fire. Shock spread across the Dominion fleet. Many alien captains now realized the truth. They were no longer fighting for victory. They were fighting for survival. Back on the Dominion flagship, Croth stared at the burning wreckage of his most powerful ships. For the first time during the war, doubt entered his mind. Humanity had changed. Their ships were stronger, their strategy smarter, their numbers far greater than anyone had imagined. Another officer spoke in a quiet, fearful voice. "Sir, we are surrounded." Croth slowly turned toward the main display. The human fleet had closed from every direction. Thousands of warships now formed a massive circle around the Dominion Armada. Escape routes were disappearing one by one. Inside the human flagship, Kane watched the final stage of the battle unfold. The Dominion fleet was trapped, their formations broken, their strongest weapons destroyed. But Kane knew the battle was not finished yet, because a wounded enemy was often the most dangerous. And somewhere inside the collapsing Dominion fleet, Grand Admiral Croth was already preparing one final desperate plan. A plan that could either save his empire or destroy everything around him, including the entire battlefield. The battlefield had turned into a sea of burning wreckage. Broken Dominion ships drifted slowly through space while distant explosions continued to flash across the darkness. The once powerful alien armada was now surrounded by the massive human fleet. Thousands of human warships formed a silent circle around the remaining Dominion forces. Inside the Dominion flagship, Grand Admiral Croth stood alone near the command window. The battle display behind him showed the terrible truth. Most of the Dominion fleet had already been destroyed. The few ships that remained were damaged and scattered. His officers spoke in low, anxious voices as they tried to understand the situation. "Sir, our outer defense groups have collapsed. Sir, enemy ships have blocked all retreat routes. Sir, multiple captains are requesting permission to surrender." Croth closed his eyes for a moment. The Dominion Empire had ruled the galaxy for centuries. Their fleets had crushed every civilization that dared to resist. Yet now a single enemy had broken their greatest armada. Humanity. Croth slowly turned back toward the command deck. His voice was calm but cold. "Send a signal to every remaining Dominion ship." The officers waited. "What message, sir?" one asked. Croth answered without hesitation. "Prepare for final protocol." The words spread across the bridge like a shadow. Final protocol was a command that every Dominion officer feared. It meant complete destruction. One officer spoke nervously. "Grand Admiral, activating that protocol will destroy everything within this system." Croth looked at the battlefield once more. That is the point. Far across the battlefield, inside the human flagship Admiral Victor, Kane studied the tactical map. The Dominion fleet was trapped. Most of their warships were already disabled. Human forces continued to slowly close the circle. Another officer spoke from the sensor station. Enemy fleet activity decreasing, Admiral. Many ships are powering down their weapons. Kane nodded slowly. They know the battle is lost. Prepare surrender channels. A moment later, a warning alarm suddenly echoed across the bridge. The sensor officer looked up in shock. Admiral, we are detecting a massive energy buildup from the Dominion flagship. Kane turned quickly. Show me. The tactical screen zoomed toward the center of the Dominion fleet. The alien command ship was glowing with dangerous energy. Other damaged Dominion vessels were moving closer to it. Another officer spoke urgently. Sir, the energy readings are unstable. This looks like a system-wide detonation device. Kane understood immediately. They are preparing to destroy the entire battlefield. If the Dominion flagship detonated its reactor core, every ship in the system could be destroyed, human and alien alike. Inside the Dominion flagship, Croth watched the energy core slowly charging. Bright streams of power flowed through the ship. Engineers rushed across the bridge, activating the final protocol systems. The entire vessel vibrated with growing energy. One officer spoke with fear. Grand Admiral, once the core reaches full power, there will be no way to stop the detonation. Croth answered quietly. That is acceptable. If the Dominion could not win this battle, then no one would. Far away across the battlefield, human ships began detecting the growing danger. Inside the human flagship, Kane gave quick orders. All fleets increase distance from the Dominion flagship. Target the command ship immediately. We must disable it before the reactor overload completes. Dozens of human warships turned their massive weapons toward the center of the Dominion formation. Powerful beams of energy rushed toward the alien command ship, but the Dominion flagship activated its final defense shields. The massive protective barrier absorbed the attacks. The ship continued charging its reactor. Time was running out. Back inside the Dominion flagship, Croft looked at the growing human fleet surrounding them. For a brief moment, he felt something strange. Respect. Humanity had fought harder than any enemy the Dominion had ever faced. But that respect would not save them. The core energy reached critical levels. Across the battlefield, the human fleet continued attacking the alien command ship. Fighter squadrons rushed toward the vessel, launching missiles. Cruisers fired heavy cannons. Dreadnoughts unleashed massive energy beams. Yet the Dominion flagship still held together. Inside the human flagship, Kane studied the timer, counting down on the tactical screen. If the reactor exploded, the shockwave would destroy everything. Every ship, every survivor, every piece of the battlefield. Another officer spoke quickly. Admiral, the enemy core will detonate in less than 3 minutes. The bridge fell silent. 3 minutes was not enough time to retreat. There was only one option. Kane looked toward the main display, showing the enormous Dominion flagship glowing with unstable energy. Then he gave a quiet order. Bring the Titan forward. Deep within the human fleet, the largest human warship slowly began moving toward the center of the battlefield. It was larger than any other ship in the armada. Its massive engines burned brightly as it pushed forward. Human ships moved aside, clearing a path. The Titan advanced directly toward the Dominion flagship. Inside the Dominion command bridge, Croft noticed the approaching vessel. One officer shouted, Sir, a massive human ship is approaching our position. Croft watched the giant vessel move closer through the window. It was enormous, far larger than his own flagship. Its armored hull reflected the burning wreckage of the battlefield. Another officer spoke nervously. Grand Admiral, the human ship is not retreating. It is moving directly toward us. Croft understood what was happening. The humans were trying to stop the detonation, even if it meant sacrificing their largest warship. For the first time during the entire battle, Croft felt uncertainty. The Titan ship continued moving closer, closer, and closer. The Dominion flagship reactor continued charging. Bright energy filled the center of the alien vessel. The timer on the human tactical screen continued counting down. 2 minutes remaining. And the fate of the entire battlefield now depended on what would happen when the Titan finally reached the Dominion flagship. The massive Titan warship moved slowly through the battlefield. Its engines burned bright against the darkness as it pushed forward through clouds of burning wreckage. Broken Dominion ships drifted around it like silent ghosts of the battle. Every human ship nearby moved aside, clearing the path for the giant vessel. Inside the human flagship, Admiral Victor Kane watched the Titan advance on the main display. The timer on the screen continued counting down. Less than 2 minutes remained before the Dominion reactor detonated. One officer spoke in a tense voice. "Admiral, the enemy core energy continues rising." Another officer added quickly, "If that reactor explodes, the shockwave will destroy every ship in this system." Kane nodded slowly. He understood the danger. Yet the Titan continued moving forward without hesitation. Inside the Titan warship, thousands of crew members worked calmly at their stations. They all knew the mission. They knew the risk. But none of them showed fear. The captain of the Titan stood on the bridge watching the glowing Dominion flagship growing larger through the front window. His voice was steady as he spoke to the crew. "Prepare collision intercept sequence." A young officer looked at him with surprise. "Sir, direct collision." The captain nodded. "There is no other way to stop that reactor." Around the battlefield, the remaining Dominion ships watched the Titan approach their flagship. Many alien captains had already powered down their weapons. Others simply drifted silently, unsure what to do. Inside the Dominion flagship, Grand Admiral Croth stood near the massive reactor control console. The energy core behind him glowed brighter with every passing second. Streams of power surged through the ship. Warning alarms echoed across the bridge. The detonation sequence could no longer be stopped. One officer spoke nervously. "Grand Admiral, a massive human vessel is approaching." Croth already knew. He could see the Titan through the large command window. The giant human warship moved directly toward them. Unafraid, unwavering, Croth watched silently. He understood their plan. The humans intended to stop the explosion by destroying the flagship before the reactor reached full power. But even that might not be enough. The energy buildup had already reached dangerous levels. If the reactor was damaged incorrectly, it could explode instantly. Yet the Titan continued forward. Back on the human flagship, Kane watched the final moments of the operation. The tactical display showed the Titan entering the final approach path. One officer whispered, "Impact in 60 seconds." Around the human fleet, every ship pulled back slightly, creating distance from the Dominion flagship. Fighter squadrons retreated. Cruisers moved away. The battlefield grew strangely quiet. Even the remaining Dominion ships stopped firing. Everyone watched the Titan. Inside the Titan bridge, the captain looked calmly at the growing image of the Dominion flagship. The alien vessel filled the entire forward window. Its glowing reactor light illuminated the dark hull of the human ship. The captain spoke one final order. "All crew secure positions. Prepare for impact." The crew followed their training without hesitation. The massive Titan increased engine power. Its speed rose rapidly. The distance between the two giant ships closed quickly. Inside the Dominion flagship, Croth continued watching the approaching human vessel. One officer shouted, "Grand Admiral, the human ship will collide with us in seconds." Croth remained calm. For the first time during the battle, he felt something unexpected. Respect. Humanity had refused to surrender. Even now, they were willing to sacrifice their greatest ship to stop the destruction of the system. The Titan rushed forward. The Dominion flagship reactor burned brighter. Energy alarms screamed across both vessels. The final seconds passed. Then the Titan struck. The enormous human warship slammed into the side of the Dominion flagship with unstoppable force. The impact shattered huge sections of the alien command ship. Massive explosions tore through the outer hull. The Titan engines continued pushing forward, driving deep into the Dominion flagship structure. Inside the alien ship, the reactor control systems collapsed. Power lines exploded. Containment fields failed. But instead of detonating, the unstable reactor suddenly shut down. The violent collision had disrupted the overload sequence. The growing energy inside the core collapsed. The massive explosion never came. Across the battlefield, a wave of shock spread through every ship. The Titans slowly drifted away from the shattered Dominion flagship. Both vessels were heavily damaged. Large sections of their hulls burned in the darkness. Inside, the human flagship Admiral Kane watched the reactor readings drop. The countdown timer suddenly stopped. One officer spoke with relief. "The reactor is offline." Another officer said quietly, "The detonation has been prevented." Across the human fleet, a quiet cheer spread through the communication channels. The battlefield that had nearly become a graveyard for thousands of ships was now silent. Inside the damaged Dominion flagship, Grand Admiral Croft looked around the destroyed bridge. Many systems had failed. Most of the ship was no longer operational. He understood the truth. The Dominion fleet had lost. Slowly, he gave the final order. "All remaining Dominion ships, power down your weapons. The war is over." Far across the battlefield, the massive human fleet remained in position. Thousands of ships surrounded the broken Dominion armada. But they did not fire. They simply watched, because the galaxy had just witnessed something unforgettable. The moment when humanity returned from the void. The moment when a war everyone believed was finished was decided by courage, sacrifice, and an unbreakable will to survive. And from that day forward, every civilization in the galaxy remembered one simple truth. Humanity might fall, but it never stays down for long.